I know that you were answering Marco's question about how to scale up to a regional scale. And then Rebecca had asked a question about resources. So if you feel happy, if Marco is happy that you've answered his question, I'll turn over to Rebecca. So Marco, are you happy?
I missed the last bit about targeting certain areas or communities.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Marco. Yeah, I think I was just kind of finishing off that answer with that I would really kind of think quite hard about which locations we chose so that we could try and get as representative a view as possible. But again, that's going to be dependent down to you know, each community, each environment, etc.
Thanks. So Rebecca, over to you.
Oh yeah, okay, thanks Matt, really interesting presentation. I'm going to ask, because I sit within a regeneration team myself, and in my experience I've not been in the post that long, but we're always chasing, we've got a very, very small budget, and when we have done these consultations before, thinking of the expectation management, you know, you start to ask people, and like you say, it sort of snowballs as to what people would like, and then there's inevitable disappointment when you sort of go cap in hand for stuff. And you can, you know, for example, we've got a site which would need leveling basically, and that requires a bit of groundwork in order to make it usable, and at that point it just sort of dies a death because that's quite an expensive thing to do. So yeah, I'm just wondering, did you, because you said at the beginning you had that sort of commitment to environmental projects initially from the company, do you think that's helped your work, or would you say that what you need to do is just take each project and kind of build that business case for each project?
Yes to the second part of your question, absolutely, and yes to the first part, in that having that buy-in from the leadership team early doors was invaluable because it gave me the confidence to do what was right, rather than doing what fitted a budget or fitted a particular narrative. And I think that's the key thing. And if we can demonstrate that, you know, look guys, let's shoot for what is right in the first instance, and if we have to value engineer and, you know, scale a few things back, then that's the reality. But personally, I would always kind of try and stand my ground and say, look, this is the right approach, and we need to stick with it, because in the long term no one's going to remember about, you know, the discussions around finance, etc. They're going to remember what kind of legacy, as it were, you know, you kind of left from that project. And for me, that's far more important. And sorry, the second part of your question was,
so I think what I said now. Yeah, it was just to do, because if I give you, so in my role, there's a lot of kinds of, we've been told, okay, go and find a solution at no cost. So the question is, you know, would you suggest that I just take each project at its face value, like you're saying, and like you were mentioning about saying costing up the price of voids, for example, and taking that as a business case? Or should we sort of challenge the senior leadership at a high level and say, talk about legacy and things like that, and see if we can do like a two-pronged attack, if you like?
Yeah, actually I'd say a three-pronged attack, because the first one would be managing expectations with the community at that very, very kind of initial stage. You know, it's really important to say, listen guys, at this point, you know, we've no idea what we're able to deliver. Really, this part of the process is all about listening to you. And I think once you kind of do that, then the community are still very happy to give you all the information that you need, but there's an expectation that's been managed. And then, yeah, the other two prongs are definitely work on a business case, because if we can demonstrate other tangible benefits that perhaps are not immediately visible, that just strengthens the case for it. And yeah, it's particularly for the long-term legacy, because let's be honest, most leadership teams thrive on ego. So if we can help support and bolster that through our own work, then it just helps us. It just helps us and gives us support to deliver these kind of schemes.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and just chip in here. You'll note that when Matt was talking about that initial engagement with the community, there were no maps, there were no mock-ups, there was nothing to show what it could look like. Matt went in there and asked questions. I've seen community regeneration schemes from Cardiff to Cape Town, and the unsuccessful ones all start off with a map or a diagram or an artist impression. So Matt, has anybody come back to you about Peerless and complained that there's no Kentucky Fried Chicken and no swimming pool?
Fortunately not. What we have had is we've had a couple of trees being vandalized by kids, which, guys, do you know what I mean? You've got to expect that. I mean, we expect a natural failure rate whenever we're doing big planting schemes anyway. There's going to be one or two, and there was one or two. You know, we planted around about 60 semi-mature trees dotted across the estate. The really, really positive thing was that as soon as there was any vandalism, and I think we lost 5 trees out of the 60, they've been replaced, is that we had community members phoning us up the day after, saying that flowering cherry that you put outside my house, some kids have snapped the branches off it. I'm really annoyed. And you know, whereas before that wouldn't have happened. That and again, I suppose demonstrating to leadership teams or whatever about empowering our tenants to feel as though they're listened and valued. I mean, all right, that might create more work for our housing officers in the future, because people feel, well, do you know what, I'm going to get in touch about this repair, I'm going to get in touch about this community event. That's a positive thing, that's a good thing, because that's what builds strong communities, you know. And at the end of the day, you know, I'm not professional at all that we've got the magic answer, because we never will have. Communities are fluid, dynamic, living, breathing things that change and have a mind all of their own. But I think, you know, if we're in a position to adapt to that, then I think that's where you can build up stronger relationships between, I hate the use of the term landlord, but, you know, between social housing provider and, crucially, the communities that we're paid to serve. If that makes sense.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And Sam Etheridge has got a question about engaging with older people.
Hi, hi, Matt. Yeah, I love your idea of treasure trails. I think it's a great way of getting people out and about. And then I was just thinking, I don't know if the demographic kind of means that you do have many sort of like elderly people, but one of the things I've been looking at is just trying to get more older people involved. And obviously sometimes doing stuff online doesn't work because, you know, and it's a bit of a sweeping statement, but maybe not all of them are tech savvy or kind of feel happy doing that. And obviously we kind of, you know, you can go and knock on people's doors, but sometimes people get a bit intimidated by that. And as you said, it's better to have them out in the community where the things are actually happening. So I just wondered if there's anything specific you did or if it wasn't relevant for you in this particular project. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's at the time, I didn't realize the significance and the importance of involving older people specifically. Now, 10 years later, being a designer for 10 years, absolutely get it. Completely get it. And in Peerless, the demographic breakdown was such that we didn't have that many older people. Inheriting old council housing stock meant that usually the council housing kind of provision was quite segregated. You know, we had general needs accommodation and sheltered accommodation, and never will the two ever mix for some reason. What did come out of the consultation, and I remember was really, really striking, was that some of that, the small amount of older members of the community that we did have in Peerless had family there. They were the patriarchs of the family, and I noted that there was a real disjointed approach. That we've got a school on the estate, kids go to the school, mum and dad more than likely are a working family, so they're out of the day. And you've got granny and granddad, or nine and tide, that in a couple of years will be forced to leave their home, and we'll stick them in Ross-on-Sea, where all the sheltered accommodation is. And I was like, how can this be right? You know, when really, you know, our strapline is creating communities to be proud of. You know, how can we justify that when essentially just down to housing provision, we're splitting families up? So obviously these things don't get resolved overnight, do they? But it's made what it has done is it's kind of pricked up the ears of our development team that whenever we're going to consider building more houses near to Palewis, that should be prioritised towards sheltered accommodation, so that if there is a natural progression of you know, family kind of movement, that they kind of kept close together. Everyone knows how invaluable grandparents are to families, and that's something that personally I think that should be supported. On a side note, we have an older persons coordinator within Cartrefi who does fantastic work in engaging our older persons, as I'm sure lots of other housing associations do. But when it comes to that kind of that community, then yeah, I'd have liked to have seen, I don't know, something that would help support those relationships stay in place. But yeah.
Thank you.
Brilliant. And if we turn back to Elizabeth with a design process question, and you'll need to turn your microphone on before.
Oh yeah, still doing it.
It gets us every time.
Yeah.
It was more of a general question actually, Matt, and also in response to Rebecca as well with small budgets, because budgets do change, the profile changes over time. I just wondered if you'd ever thought about using, especially with small budgets, participatory budgeting kind of techniques, so allowing the community to make those decisions and make the decisions on what that small budget is spent on based on the consultation feedback. Thanks.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yes, we did. We had PB in place when I first joined the company, which is now 10 years ago. I think at the time TPAS Cymru and a few others were kind of, you know, promoting participatory budgeting. I think it could have done with a more palatable name. It's hard to say. It's even harder to understand sometimes, particularly when you're trying to communicate that to people who have no idea what you're talking about. We've since done away with PB, and we've introduced, I think we call it community chest funding. Same thing, I think, essentially. It's a pot of cash, and individuals or community groups can apply. The way that is kind of promoted is through our community involvement or our ILCs, I think, wardens, independent living coordinators. All the terminology changes these days, doesn't it? But so that we still have that mechanism, because I think that's really important. I mean, listen, it's great when you've got £1 million and you can do massive whole scale change. Fantastic, because that gives us an opportunity to address wider landscape and environmental concerns like green infrastructure, like connecting an estate via green corridors to the surrounding countryside, like introducing SUDs and all those other good things that we should be doing as landscape practitioners. But a planter with some daffodils in it, you know, that has come from a community, to me, has got just as much oomph behind it. And also, I always think that it's a powerful visual indicator that a community cares about where they live. So yeah, for small budgets, it's always going to be difficult in disseminating that pot of cash, but I think they're crucial in supporting communities. Absolutely, yeah. But also, just to add to that, Elizabeth, is the use of grant funds as well. You know, we created a skate park up in Palewis. I think it was about 70k. We got it all paid for. We're quite fortunate on the North Wales coast that we can tap into the Rill Flats Gwynter Moor offshore wind farm fund. There may be other landfill kind of tax funds out there in your areas. all right, it might take a few days, a week or so to put the application together. But man, if you get 70k for nothing, then that's a huge bonus. So yeah, I would always advocate looking for other pots of cash, and particularly if it's a community thing, you know, and it addresses the criteria that the funders are looking for as well. You know, they're falling over themselves to give money to good causes. So it's down to us as professionals to help facilitate that transfer of cash from them to where it should be.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Matt. And I think that almost brings us right back full circle again, because by starting off by saying to people, not what do you want here, but how do you respond to this place? How does it make you feel? And then going on, checking out how people feel about the place, then saying, well, here are the kinds of things that you'd like. And what we didn't see today was how Matt then worked up those, here's the kinds of things that you'd like, into, you know, almost like, what do you call them? Almost like picture palettes of the kinds of things that could be done. So that gives Matt, through his expertise and knowledge of budgeting, a way to do those picture books, almost, you know, to help set people's expectations as to what can be done with the money. You know, they can't have an airport, but maybe we can have a grassy helicopter pad. And that then enabled the final scheme to be delivered within budget. And there were so many other amazing things that happened at Peelwys and have happened at Trickham and are happening in Llanrwst and the other places where Cartrefi Conwy are working. So I think we could go on for ages, but I'm conscious that Matt's got a meeting in about 4 minutes' time.
Yeah.
And he'll need to get a cup of coffee at least before that.
Just enough time to put the kettle on, Pete. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today, Matt. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody else has too. I'll be posting the recording on YouTube